once again from the Prim Reaper. This is a series that has been an incredibly long time coming. I actually got the idea for this about a year ago, but I've just had so many other things coming up that I've been putting it off. But now, I think is a good time to really dedicate some effort towards doing it justice. So, what am I talking about? Well, many of us are already aware, at least tangentially, about the idea of social justice, right? And while many of the folks who watch my videos get this little instinctive red flag going up the moment they hear it, many other people who hear the term think of it a little bit more uncritically. After all, the concept of justice is an important cornerstone of our civilization, right? And with justice being a positive term, what could be so wrong with the idea of social justice? Well, unfortunately, it's not always perfectly clear what could be wrong with it. I mean, I'm sure many of us who experience that uncomfortable sensation when we hear the word can't even clearly explain why we feel that way. That's what my aim with this video series is going to be, to point out all those little insidious aspects of social justice, the ways in which it's not the wonderful path towards peace and harmony between all people that it makes itself out to be. In this introductory video, I wanted to go over some basics before I start getting into the meat of things. Let's start by defining the concept of social justice. I actually found an article that serves my purposes very well here, as it defines social justice from the lens that an activist, a supporter, or even just a casual individual who has heard the term once or twice might view it. I'll read a few snippets from this article just to paint a good general picture. I'll link the full article below if you want to read it in its entirety. Justice is the concept of fairness. Social justice is fairness as it manifests in society. That includes fairness in healthcare, employment, housing, and more. Discrimination and social justice are not compatible. Social justice depends on 4 essential goals: human rights, access, participation, and equity. When a society is just, it protects and respects everyone's human rights. This connection is essential since human rights are recognized globally. Being able to access essentials like shelter, food, and education is crucial for a just society. If access is restricted based on factors like gender, race, or class, it leads to suffering for individuals, communities, and society as a whole. Social justice isn't possible if only some voices are heard. Unfortunately, that's often what happens, and the voices of the marginalized and vulnerable are silenced. Many people believe that equality is one of the principles of social justice, but it's actually equity. What's the difference? Equity takes into account the effects of discrimination and aims for an equal outcome. There's a graphic that demonstrates this well. 3 people are trying to see over a fence. As an aside, I will return to this image later. Social justice means that everyone's human rights are respected and protected. Everyone has equal opportunities. This doesn't guarantee that society will be perfect and everyone will always be happy. However, everyone will have a fighting chance at the life they want. You can see all the positive words that are shared in this article. Fairness, human rights, a just society, equality. Any rational and unselfish kind of person would agree that these are good things, right? After all, the converse, imbalance, injustice, inequality, human rights violations, all of these words immediately stir up images of unpleasant, even barbaric societies in which we surely would not want to belong. So where does the disconnect start to come in? Well, let's return back to the example image they mentioned in the article. It's a famous image, and I would be very surprised if you all weren't familiar with it, but let's briefly explore it. Now, the original image simply demonstrated the supposed difference between equality and equity by showcasing 3 people trying to watch a baseball game without paying for any tickets and instead trying to peep over a fence. Lately, they've been adding a 3rd image called Liberation, in which the fence has been removed and we now just hilariously have these 3 insane people standing in the outfield cheering, who are inevitably about to be escorted away by security. Let's just start with the first 2 images for argument's sake. and because, frankly, attempting to illustrate the idea of liberation from human rights inequalities with removing a fence around an arena housing a recreational sport is just a totally garbage analogy to begin with. Looking at these two images, it's nice and simple and obvious how to solve the problem. Nobody would argue that the equality square is the better scenario just from these photos alone. After all, it's not like the tall guy is giving up anything other than a mangy old box that doesn't meaningfully improve his situation. Not only is it a no-brainer, but people who don't think on it any more than just a glance at the photos will be left with this lasting residual idea that, oh yeah, I guess equity is better than equality. However, let's try fleshing out some details a little bit and see if the same logic still holds true. What if the tall fellow put a lot of time and effort into building a proper stool for himself so that he could more comfortably see over the fence? Is he obligated to give up his stool just to help a stranger better be able to see? I mean, it would sure be nice of him if he gave it up willingly, but should he be required to? What if the littlest guy not only didn't build his own stool, but in fact had carelessly smashed 2 boxes prior to the other 2 guys showing up? Does he still deserve more despite his previous reckless actions? Unfortunately, equity rarely looks so simple in real life. This is almost the easiest sort of straw man you could come up with to try to promote the idea of equity. Kind of like comparing a mustache-twirling multi-billionaire to his poor workers working for minimum wage or less. It's easy to present examples like these and say, see, nobody deserves to have so much while others have so little. Equity is therefore 100% a good thing. But the buck doesn't usually stop there, does it? I'm not even talking about the people who see injustice in progressively smaller earnings gaps between 2 individuals. For example, not just multi-billionaires, but also millionaires, or even just people who are able to afford their own housing, say, versus a homeless individual living on the street. But what about examples where individuals make broad, sweeping claims about entire racial or sexual groups being marginalized, and therefore needing to be propped up at the expense of the groups that are perceived to not be marginalized? What about the people who look not at the full context of an individual's situation, but rather focus on the traits of said individuals and then proceeding to make inferences about their situation based on those traits? When we look at equity as a simple binary of this group has more, this group has less, therefore this group needs to give up more to support this group, we begin to lose a lot of nuance and context that allow us to take measured steps to improve the lives of others. Instead, we begin to focus on surface issues that not only often do not make the problem better, but often cause different kinds of problems otherwise. Some examples. When we assume blindly that one group of people has all the privilege in society, we become blinded to areas in which they might be struggling. Worse, we may even become less empathetic even if we acknowledge they're struggling. Individuals belonging to the supposed privileged group may find it very difficult to reach out for help when they are struggling, owing to a lack of services available for them or government funding to support their concerns. After all, they don't need support. They're the privileged group. Another example, when we assume blindly that one group of people is oppressed or at all times disprivileged, this also impacts the way we view and treat individuals from this group. We may make assumptions that a person is worse off than they really are. We may make concessions about them that we would not make for other individuals, leading many of them to question if they have really gotten to where they are based on merit or based on diversity points. We may downplay their failures, or even blame them on external factors. In time, these individuals may even come to see themselves as worse off than they really are. They may feel discouraged, like they're going to be discriminated against far more than they otherwise might be. They may become suspicious or distrustful of others. Now, this video is just intended to be a brief introduction to the series, so I'm not going into as full of detail as I will be in each of the segments. But one thing I am hoping to do in each of these videos is to provide acted-out examples of the difference between what might be an example of a social justice lens through which to view a subject, contrasted with a more neutral lens. I'm hoping to do this in as good faith a manner as humanly possible, using examples I have either seen in person or based on readings I have encountered in my studies. I can write about the problems with this kind of thinking until the cows come home, but I don't often think it makes as much sense until people see some examples of the kinds of thinking it might be bringing up for people. For now, I will end this video here and try to get to work on the rest. I have a few different categories in mind. Hijacking the desire to help others, lionizing of bad behavior and weakness, guilt as a weapon, control and divisiveness, and the justification of hate. This is still a work in progress, and as usual, things may come up that knock it off schedule. But as always, if you have any thoughts or anything specific you'd like to see addressed in this series, I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments. I've been trying to be better about responding to them too. So with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.